Hi everyone, I am Karie Johnston and I am the Vice President of the Board of Directors for the Inspire Awards. And we are doing another in the series of videos to introduce nominees and recipients of awards. And today with me I have Trevor Stratton, and I would like to introduce him as the recipient of the Charles Roy Award this year. Hi, Trevor, welcome.
Hello, thank you. This is a great opportunity. Appreciate it.
Really glad to have you here today. So, Trevor, let's start off with you telling us, please, a little bit about your work in relation to your nomination and then receipt of the Charles Roy Award for 2020.
Yeah, I guess it's very hard to separate my work from my personal life because it is my own personal circumstances that brought me into HIV activism. So
Right.
in 1990, I tested positive for HIV in Toronto. And of course, that was before the antiretrovirals came out in 1996 and rolled out in 1997. So it was a really scary time. It was, you know, I already have experience living through a pandemic. So it's really interesting to see how COVID-19 is rolling out. But it was, you know, it was an organization called Two-Spirited People of the First Nations that reached out to me, and they even asked me if I wanted to get involved with the organization as a worker or as a staff member, or at least just to start working with them and helping to push it forward like that. And I wasn't ready at that time. I didn't see myself as having much to offer, but what I was attracted to was that the organization had a cultural approach to LGBT issues that are Indigenous, in the sense of our ancient two-spirit traditions, which are different in every Indigenous culture. And they really espoused that and promoted two-spirit people taking our rightful place back in our community. So it went way further than just HIV for me. And it was really good that the organization was there, because I was able to, after making contact with different activists and the staff and volunteers there, I became part of a community in Toronto, the Two-Spirit community. It's kind of a subset of the Indigenous community. It wasn't until I developed HIV, or developed AIDS in, what year would that have been? Would have been around 1997 or so, which was just after the antiretrovirals came out. It took me a couple of years to build up enough trust with the support of the community, and I got quite sick. And another organization called the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network, they also reached out to me, and so did the Ontario Aboriginal HIV/AIDS Strategy. So I ended up volunteering a lot and joining the board of directors there, and eventually got off of disability and began working as a consultant in HIV after learning so much on boards of directors and learning about governance. And then actually, it's a lot different when you're, you know, on the board, you're giving advice and giving direction. As a consultant or a staff member, you're actually implementing, you're doing the work that's being, you know, recommended. So that was the door that opened up for me. And it really led to so much more. I mean, at first, I was working for the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network, I think starting around 2005, as the liaison for Indigenous people living with HIV. So working with others living with HIV, and we further developed the caucus of Indigenous people living with HIV, which still exists to this day. I did that for 11 years, which really gave me the credentials, I would say, or the kind of feedback or the backup to be able to bring all those voices into the different tables where I find myself to this day. You know, I'm working with the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network. I went on to work with community readiness and community mobilization. And then I went on to work with harm reduction, working with people who are actively using drugs and coming up with alternative programming, safe programming for people who continue to do it or who don't abstain, and push, and promoting that in the Indigenous community so they would have a place to go you know, where it says on the door, if you're under the influence of alcohol or drugs, you can't come in. So how do you get services? So it went on from there and to the position I am now, which I took in 2011, which is the coordinator of the International Indigenous Working Group on HIV and AIDS. So that's a far cry from, you know, working with other Indigenous peoples, helping them to tell their stories of living with HIV and AIDS in the communities, and went from there over the last 15 years to the international level, where I find myself, I found myself a few years ago on the NGO delegation to the Program Coordinating Board of UNAIDS. And I held that seat for the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network, and that's the first time an Indigenous organization was part of the board of UNAIDS, and now they're actually including Indigenous in laundry lists. We don't have any targets set yet for Indigenous, but that's the work of the future, right? So
Yeah.
I just completed a 3-year term on the board of the global network of people living with HIV, or GNP Plus, with its head office in Amsterdam. And I'm also the president of Two-Spirited People of the First Nations, the very first organization that reached out to me. And I'm seeing such monumental changes over the last 3 years that I've been on the board. The organization has completely turned around and has expanded far beyond HIV into trying to become everything that our community wants us to be, which is a real tall order, as you can imagine.
Yeah, wow. Well, that your story is incredible, and outstanding work, and congratulations on all of those accomplishments. That's really amazing, and clearly you are representing our community and your community very, very well. So with that, Trevor, what inspires you about our community more locally in the Toronto area?
Well, people like Charles Roy. I mean, if you ever Google Charles Roy and see the accomplishments of that man, you know, it's hard to imagine that I'm receiving an award that's named after this giant. And that's what inspires me, is the giants that came before me. You know, I wasn't there at the very, very beginning, but people like Charles Roy were. People like Art Sokol in the Indigenous community. People like Laverne Monette. These people were my mentors. They taught me so much, and because they saw something in me. They saw that maybe I would be a person that could come along and follow in their footsteps. And that's I think that's my job more and more as I age with HIV, is to be sure that there's people that I pass on the knowledge and the things that I've learned along my path. Those need to be passed down to the younger generation. And that brings me to the second. It's not only us old dogs that inspires me, or, you know, the first cohort of Indigenous or HIV activists. It's the new people that are coming in. I mean, I know why I'm doing this, because those days were desperate. We had demonstrations of desperation, you know, setting police cars on fire and writing letters demanding that they throw their dead bodies on the steps of the White House, and things like that. You know, that's not like that now. So I'm just wondering, where do the youth get their motivation? Some of these young HIV activists in the LGBT community, they are so inspiring. And like I say, where does that come from? I know where it comes from, trauma from me, but from them, I need to understand that more. And I hope that the older generations that are doing this work can get together with the younger generations, because we have a lot to learn from the youth now. We've gotten a little bit out of touch. Our messaging isn't working. HIV is going up in our communities again. Yeah. You know, so I find inspiration from our youth as well.
Wow, that's great. Amazing that I wasn't actually aware of the mentorship that you had received. So that's great. And that you're now here to mentor others. That's fantastic. So with that in mind, what would you suggest that we as a community could do better, either in relation to your area of expertise or any other thing in general?
Yeah, I think that we could be more, we could have more solidarity within the LGBT community. I mean, if you look through the history, and it's happening, I mean, it is happening. Yeah, I remember the early days when I first started going to the underage to the gay bars, the men's bars. It was almost impossible for a woman to come into a men's bar. And if a man tried to bring his girlfriend into the bar, it would be horrible. They would hiss and there would be catcalls, and generally they were just made to feel unwelcome in that space. And that's come a long way now. We have a lot of spaces where men and women come together. There are still spaces where women want to be with themselves and men want to be themselves, but it's a lot different now. There's more cohesive. We seem to be fighting for each other's causes more. And that brings me to the transgender people. I remember being online on the dating sites and stuff, and someone who was appearing as perhaps the opposite sex than they were assigned at birth, and they would be, all kinds of horrible comments by some of the gay men, and I just couldn't believe it. We fought this hard so we could discriminate against trans people, so we could be free to discriminate, and bisexual people too. I mean, there's a lot of mistrust of bisexual. You never trust a bisexual. I happen to be bi myself, so I live in this kind of a middle place. And where are the bisexual neighborhoods? Where are the bisexual bars? Actually there's progress there too, but it's slow. And let's get even further into the differences between cultures and races, and the racism I see, and the sexism, and I think we have a long way to go. We have to realize that we are not just a silo by ourselves. And even this LGBT, those are like silos. We need to be together and find reasons to fight together. And again, that is happening, but we need more of that. We need to advocate for the people that are not white, that don't have white privilege, the ones that aren't doing as well, living with HIV or getting HIV at higher rates. There's a lot more work we need to do in strengthening our solidarity, because there's a lot of people that don't like LGBTI2SQ. We have a lot of people against us who would take our rights away. And it's only together that we can stand up proudly with dignity and demand our human rights.
Yeah. And do you have any suggestions for instance, let's say just in Toronto, organizations where people can come together in a greater way? Like, for instance, normally, especially leading up to Pride, we might have had a lot of opportunities to bring people together, but that hasn't happened as much this year. So just thinking, like, how do we get people to connect in that way?
Yeah, it's a lot harder now too, with everything going virtual. It's, when's the last time I hugged a friend? Mm-hmm. That's huge for our mental health and just feeling like we're part of the world. And I'm quite introverted, but I'm at the end of my rope now. I need people.
Yes.
I need my people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One of the things I think really strengthens our movement is the focus on family, the focus on 2S LGBTQI families. Yeah. And they always say, like some of our adversaries will talk about family values as if that excludes us. Right. We're all part of families, whether we're parents or whether we're sons, daughters, aunties. We are all part of families, and we always have been. And the definition of family is very, very broad. And so we need to take that back, these family values. Hate is not a family value, I'm sorry. But, we need to really promote that family and community belonging. And I think one way I saw, it's male specific, but is this new gay men's health hub that's will be opening soon in Toronto. They're going to call it HQ, like headquarters. Okay. And that should be quite interesting. It is men only, but they are really working hard to work with and consult with some of the communities that are not gay white men, which is of course the majority, in Toronto, but there's a lot of other communities as well. And a strong focus will be on HIV in the Health Hub, STIs, and mental health support, social and even spiritual and Indigenous components, and our colleagues and friends from the African, Caribbean, Black community. So we're hoping that the end result will be a place where everybody will feel comfortable, and a place that we can all call our own, and just walk in and, you know, maybe take our shoes off and read a magazine and just feel right at home.
So during this time of COVID, where we're all still relatively separated, will that be taking place on Zoom calls or some other way that people are able to connect, at least online?
Yeah, it's, you know, the entire International AIDS Conference, it was supposed to be, it's every 2 years, and it was supposed to be in San Francisco and Oakland this year, and they usually have about 20 to 25,000 people. And that entire conference went online. It was a virtual experience. And this year we were to put on our 8th International Indigenous Pre-Conference on HIV and AIDS. We had a strong focus on Two-Spirit and Indigenous LGBTQ issues this year. And it was all online. So usually we'd be 2 days in person. And it's important for people to be in person, but not if it means my grandfather and grandmother are going to get COVID and suffer and perhaps even die. So it's very responsible for us to do it this way. And the new normal is, we will figure it out, but we transferred it into 11 webinars, 11 2-hour webinars, and the same amount of content stretched over the whole month of July. And we're seeing that more and more all the time. Even the International Two-Spirit Powwow, this coming up soon in 2020, that's all online. How do you do a powwow online? They figured it out. They're doing it. It's not the first one.
No, I mean, people's creativity is certainly shining.
Yes, yeah.
That's great. So one last question then is, why do you think that the Inspire Awards is an important event within our community to celebrate individuals and groups?
Well, it is very important. It's extremely important. You know, I'm, as I said, I'm a bit introverted myself, so it's a bit embarrassing for me, and I don't seek out an award, but I totally understand the importance of holding up organizations and individuals and saying, look at this. And it's not for me, really. It's for the whole community to celebrate our successes and to celebrate our, well, how can I say this? Community servants. I'm a community servant.
Yes.
People call me a leader, but leading means listening to people and bringing their voices to places where people are sitting there listening, wanting to hear voices. So I consider myself like a conduit, a pipeline for these voices, these opinions, and these needs and wants to get to the decision makers' tables. And that's the whole thing around Indigenous HIV activism, is that we need to be at the tables. Often we were not at the tables. More and more we are. But what we realize, you know, is that if you're not at the table, you could be on the menu and not even know it.
Yes.
It's better to be at the table, helping to make the plans, rather than having people make plans for you, or even worse, not considering you at all, your concerns.
Yeah, so absolutely.
That's really important. It draws attention not only to the community who celebrates these successes, but to the larger population, the ones that don't think about HIV or LGBT issues every day, and the ones who maybe should be thinking about it every once in a while and having these discussions around the kitchen table with their families.
Yes, yeah. Well, I can tell you that hearing you even talk today has educated me quite a bit about the importance of having these awards so that we get to meet people like you and see what it is that you're doing. Because obviously very, very important work. And is there anything else that you would like to add to wrap up our conversation today that you'd like people to know about the work that you're doing?
Just that Indigenous peoples not only need allies. I mean, allies, an ally is a word like LGBT ally. I can just say it. I'm an LGBT ally. But what are you doing about that? So
Right.
to go further than being an ally to being a co-conspirator, I've been reading a lot about this, conspiring and making plans with Indigenous peoples or with African, Caribbean, Black peoples or with youth or with people that aren't like me, that we need to overlap into each other's areas sometimes and advocate for their issues as well. Because there are tables, suddenly I find myself, I'm an Indigenous person at a table, but there's no ACB community members at the table. So I'll try to bring that in. Or often there's First Nations people, but there's no Inuit people or Métis people. So trying to bring those issues in, or advocating for youth, etc. Just, we need to get out of our bubbles. It's not about advocating for, you know, Indigenous guys with light skin and green eyes that are bisexual. That's not what I'm doing. I'm listening to who's out there, who comes, trying to create spaces for people that we know are out there. They're not there yet. So it's more, it's like, okay, so welcome. We've been thinking about you, and we've made a place for you. Now, please make it your own. We know we tried to make it as nice, as accommodating as we can, but now make it yours. Make it look like you, you know, and so that becomes part of all of us and who we are. And everyone has a role, everyone has a responsibility. And I think the more we can do to help our young people, or anyone really, the more we can do to help them to find out what their role is on Mother Earth. Why are you here? The better off we'll all be, because then we become the natural helpers that we were born to be. That is my vision of a beautiful response to Indigenous issues, to HIV issues, and to LGBTQ issues.
Wow, it's a lot. Thank you very much for that. Lots to think about. And I want to congratulate you again, and thank you for participating in this video. And I just want to remind you and everybody else who will watch this video that on September the 18th at 7 p.m. in Toronto, we will be hosting a live event with Martha Chavez as our host to be introducing you and all the other recipients of awards for Inspire this year.
Wow, I won't miss that. I'll be
sure. Don't miss that. And hopefully there will be some time in the not too distant future where we all will get to meet and hug each other. And I wish you lots of luck with all of your endeavors.
Well, thank you very much, Karie, and congratulations to the Inspire Awards. We look forward to it every year, and especially this time, we're really excited.
Okay.
All right.
Take care and be safe out there.
All right, Karie. Take care.
Bye, Trevor.